The Fellowship of the Frightened Steak. On Ken Paxton, Tofu Panic, Fake Christianity, and the Sacred Right of Frightened Men to Confuse Mockery with Moral Courage. By Elias Winter, May 26, 2026. Read by an automated voice. There are empires that collapse under debt, corruption, war, loneliness, broken hospitals, bad schools, spiritual exhaustion, and the slow conversion of public life into private extraction. Texas, we are told, faces something worse: tofu. This was the great revelation offered from the stage, that somewhere in the political wilderness, beyond the cattle, beyond the megachurches, beyond the oil wells and the real estate scams, and the private equity clinics, and the men who confuse sunglasses indoors with leadership, there lurks a young Christian Democrat whose campaign once expressed kindness toward vegan businesses. Naturally, civilization trembled. Ken Paxton stood before a cheering crowd and did what men like him do when reality becomes inconvenient. He reached for the nearest symbolic freak. He mocked James Tallarico, as if the man were not running for public office, but had emerged from a gender-neutral Whole Foods baptismal font, carrying oat milk, a reusable bag, and a suspiciously gentle interpretation of the Sermon on the Mount. The crowd laughed. That is the part worth attending to. Not merely the lies. Lies in politics are old. Lies are the mildew of public life. They grow anywhere the windows are shut, and the room is warm with ambition. The interesting thing was not that Paxton lied. The interesting thing was that the room enjoyed it. They were not cheering an argument. They were cheering permission. Permission to mock before understanding. Permission to degrade before listening. Permission to turn a person into a joke and then call the laughter discernment. Permission, above all, to remain the normal ones. That is the real narcotic, because in the reactionary imagination, normal is not a description. It is a throne, and the frightened will commit almost any dishonesty to stay seated on it. 1. The crowd laughed. The joke did not need to be accurate. Accuracy would only have slowed the ritual. A good political lie, in this environment, does not function like a proposition. It functions like glue. It binds the room together. It gives everyone the same object of disgust. It tells the anxious, the resentful, the bored, the aging, the frightened, and the morally underemployed that they are still members of the same tribe because they can still laugh at the same enemy. That is why the cheering mattered. A crowd that laughs at a lie is no longer merely misinformed. It is rehearsing a form of citizenship. It is saying, we know who belongs. We know who does not. We know who gets to be mocked. We know who must explain himself. We know who is normal by default. The crowd did not need to know whether James Tallarico was vegan. It did not need to examine his theology. It did not need to understand his record, his campaign, his faith, or his actual position on anything. In fact, understanding would have been a disruption. Understanding is dangerous in such rooms. It interrupts the pleasure of contempt. The mockery worked because it spared them contact with the person. This is the oldest function of political ridicule, to prevent recognition. A man who can be made ridiculous does not have to be answered. A man who can be labeled a freak does not have to be debated. A man who can be placed outside the tribe does not have to be encountered as a neighbor. So Paxton gave them the usual ingredients: vegetables, gender, Jesus, masculinity, Texas. The 5 food groups of modern American hysteria. And the crowd, well trained by years of grievance theater, knew what to do. It laughed. 2. Behold, the tofu antichrist. In the reactionary imagination, tofu is never just tofu. Tofu is a gateway drug to Portland. Pronouns: oat milk, therapy, public transportation, moral ambiguity, and eventually, health insurance. It begins innocently enough. A man eats lentils. Then he starts caring about animal welfare. Soon he is asking questions about climate change. Then he reads a book. Then he believes women. Then he stops saying illegals. Then he starts talking about mercy in public. Before you know it, he is standing in Texas quoting Jesus without sounding like he wants to privatize Medicare. This cannot be allowed. So the machinery activates. Vegan does not mean vegan. It means alien. Pro-trans does not mean a policy position. It means contamination. Anti-Jesus does not mean anti-Jesus. It means this man has taken religious language out of our possession and begun using it against cruelty. The accusation does not describe. It sorts. That is the point. The purpose is not to inform the voter that James Tallarico eats tofu in a suspicious manner under a full moon. The purpose is to make him culturally illegible. It is to turn him into a bundle of symbolic irritants before he can appear as a person. Vegan, soft, woke, weird, anti-Christian, unmanly, un-Texan, unserious. This is not politics as persuasion. It is politics as contamination management. The mob is told, do not listen to him. Do not look at him. Do not ask why a man like Paxton needs to lie about him. Simply place him outside the circle and laugh. The absurdity is almost touching in its desperation. An entire political movement, armed with donors, media networks, churches, attorneys general, sheriffs, consultants, podcasters, billionaires, pastors with ring lights, and men whose profile pictures involve trucks, has decided that the republic may fall because a young Democrat seems insufficiently hostile to vegetables. There are serious countries. There are unserious countries. And then there is a country where adults gather in convention halls to defend brisket from theological ambiguity. 3. The real threat. A Christian they cannot own. The problem is not that James Tallarico hates Jesus. The problem is worse. He appears to have read him. This creates difficulties. The right knows what to do with secular liberals. It has a museum of insults ready for them. Coastal elites, Marxists, groomers, socialists, globalists, snowflakes, bureaucrats, professors, people who say systems and order salad without shame. But a progressive Christian in Texas is more irritating. He disturbs the categories. He does not arrive wearing the costume assigned to him. He does not politely stand inside the caricature. He speaks of faith, morality, the poor, the stranger, public obligation, and the common good in a language that sounds suspiciously less like cable news and more like Christianity. This is intolerable, because the entire architecture depends on monopoly. They must own Jesus, not follow him, necessarily. That would be extravagant. Following Jesus would require dangerous activities. Mercy, humility, solidarity with the despised, suspicion of wealth, defense of the vulnerable, forgiveness, truthfulness, and the occasional inconvenience of seeing one's enemy as human. No, owning Jesus is cleaner. Jesus becomes a flag, a brand, a border wall with sandals, a theological security badge. He is not the crucified God standing with the humiliated. He is the mascot of those who would like to continue humiliating them. So when someone like Tallarico speaks from within Christianity while refusing the cruelty, the panic must intensify. He cannot merely be wrong. He must be fake. He cannot merely be progressive. He must be anti-Jesus. He cannot merely disagree. He must be evidence of invasion. This is how religious monopoly protects itself. It does not debate the rival witness. It excommunicates him from the stage with a joke. A Christian Democrat is dangerous because he forces the crowd to ask whether Christianity might have something to do with mercy, the poor, the stranger, the sick, the prisoner, and other deeply suspicious activities. That question cannot be permitted to form, so the crowd laughs first. Laughter, here, is prophylactic. It prevents conscience. 4. The sacred right to remain the normal ones. The deepest privilege is not money. Money is useful, of course. It buys judges, silence, lake houses, influence, and men in fleece vests who say market-based solution while destroying something old and public. But the deeper privilege is the right to call yourself normal and make everyone else explain their existence. That is what is being defended. Not Christianity, not Texas, not children, not masculinity, not freedom, normalcy. For many of these voters, America was not experienced as a plural experiment, but as an inheritance. Christian, heterosexual, patriotic, English-speaking, masculine, suspicious of intellectuals, deferential to police, sentimental about soldiers, allergic to cities, and deeply confident that history had placed them near the moral center of the universe. Then the world changed. Civil rights, feminism, immigration, gay rights, secularization, urban power, university language, corporate HR theology, trans visibility, climate politics, black presidents, women who do not smile on command, young people who say actually before dismantling your grandfather's cosmology. To many people, this did not feel like pluralism. It felt like theft. The old default had been demoted into one identity among many, and the demoted default has spent decades calling this demotion persecution. That is the emotional background of the laughter. When Paxton mocks Tallarico, the crowd hears more than a joke. It hears restoration. You are still normal. You are still real Texas. You are still real America. You are still the people who judge. You do not have to be judged. This is the bargain. A corrupt man offers a frightened crowd symbolic superiority in exchange for moral surrender. And the crowd takes the deal. They are not afraid of being oppressed by Tofu. They are afraid of losing the authority to laugh at it. 5. Why the smallest population becomes the largest emergency. No empire has ever been defeated by pronouns. This has not stopped men with podcasts from preparing for Verdun. The obsession with trans people is one of the clearest signs that the politics has become sacrificial. A tiny population, already vulnerable, already burdened, already made to explain itself endlessly to strangers with opinions and microphones, is asked to carry the full emotional weight of American decline. This is rude, inefficient, and theologically deranged. Trans people did not hollow out rural hospitals. They did not offshore manufacturing. They did not design the American healthcare labyrinth. They did not bankrupt families with insulin prices. They did not turn housing into an asset class. They did not invent private equity. They did not flood the country with opioids. They did not make men lonely. They did not make churches cruel. They did not convert politics into spectacle. They did not replace community with algorithmic rage pellets. But they are useful. They are small enough to mythologize, unfamiliar enough to caricature, visible enough to symbolize change, vulnerable enough to punish. That is the perfect scapegoat. The trans panic is not really about trans people. It is about who gets to define reality. It is about the fear that one of the last supposedly stable hierarchies, male/female, father/mother, strong/weak, protector/protected, normal/deviant, may no longer be available as a simple map of authority. For reactionary politics, this is metaphysical vandalism. If gender is complex, what else is complex? If the body does not automatically settle the social order, what else must be re-examined? If some people do not fit the old categories, who gave them permission to exist without apology? That is the real panic. Not numbers, meaning. The vulnerable minority becomes the screen onto which a frightened society projects its terror of modernity. Medicine, bureaucracy, academia, therapy language, queer visibility, online youth culture, institutional liberalism, expertise, ambiguity, pluralism, and the unbearable possibility that the old order was not nature, but power wearing nature's clothes. So they say trans when they mean, this world has become unrecognizable, and I want someone punished for it. The target is small. The terror is large. That is how scapegoating works. 6. The children. The children. Always the children. Every moral panic eventually discovers children. Children are rhetorically perfect because no decent person wants them harmed and no dishonest person can resist hiding behind them. Protect the children is the phrase a mob uses when it wants to stop sounding like a mob. It transforms aggression into care. It launders disgust through innocence. It lets adults speak in the voice of moral tenderness while indulging fantasies of control and punishment. The child, in this rhetoric, is rarely a child. The child is a portable altar on which adults sacrifice their anxieties. This does not mean every concern involving children is false. That would be lazy. Children matter. Schools matter. Medicine matters. Parents matter. Boundaries matter. Development matters. Public trust matters. But in the Paxtonian ecosystem, children is not usually an invitation to seriousness. It is a spell cast to end seriousness. The structure is always the same. I am not targeting a vulnerable minority. I am protecting children. I am not indulging disgust. I am defending innocence. I am not manufacturing panic. I am naming evil. It is a convenient magic trick. Hatred enters one side of the machine and concern exits the other. And because the word children carries sacred force, the speaker does not have to prove much. The image does the work. A threatened child floats above the argument like a little political angel, blessing whatever cruelty follows. This is especially useful for people who do not otherwise seem interested in children once they require health care, housing, food, gun safety, public schools, clean water, paid leave, or protection from poverty. The child is most sacred when imaginary. The living child, expensive and complicated, can wait. 7. The masculinity of meat products. There is a theology of masculinity in all this, though one hesitates to dignify it by calling it theology. Maybe cuisine with grievances. In this worldview, manhood is measured by one's relationship to meat, contempt, and emotional constipation. A man must eat properly, mock properly, dominate properly, and demonstrate at regular intervals that no interior life has survived the journey into adulthood. The attacks on Tallarico are therefore not random. Low T, tofu, vegan, soft, pro-trans, anti-Jesus. This is gender policing disguised as politics. The charge is not, his policy is wrong. The charge is, he is the wrong kind of man. Too gentle, too articulate, too morally fluent, too comfortable with compassion, too Christian in the dangerous sense, too unwilling to prove strength through cruelty. This must be feminized before it becomes attractive. Because there is always a risk that people might notice another form of strength. Steadiness without domination, faith without scapegoating, conviction without sadism, masculinity without theatrical contempt. That kind of strength is threatening to men whose entire emotional economy depends on pretending cruelty is courage. They do not need Paxton to be good. They need him to make goodness look weak. That is why the mockery matters. It trains the crowd to experience decency as softness, mercy as effeminacy, and moral seriousness as some suspicious urban deficiency best treated with smoked meat and a podcast subscription. In this theology, the path to manhood runs through brisket, dominance, and a suspicious relationship with vegetables. One begins to suspect that the steak is frightened. 8. The deplorability of the performance. The word deplorable became famous because politicians are not supposed to say what everyone can see. It was then absorbed into the great American machine that converts criticism into merchandise. The insult became a T-shirt. The wound became an identity. The accusation became a flag. This is one of the more reliable talents of the reactionary marketplace. No moral judgment is so severe that it cannot be turned into a koozie. But stripped of campaign history, the word names something real. Not ordinary conservatism. Ordinary conservatism is not deplorable. Disagreement is not deplorable. Wanting lower taxes is not deplorable. Believing in tradition is not deplorable. Being religious is not deplorable. Loving Texas is not deplorable. Eating meat with devotional intensity is not, strictly speaking, deplorable. What is deplorable is cheering lies. What is deplorable is watching a corrupt demagogue turn a person into a freak object and calling the resulting pleasure patriotism. What is deplorable is using Christianity to sanctify contempt. What is deplorable is turning vulnerable people into props for your unprocessed dread. What is deplorable is laughing before listening because listening might require moral adjustment. What is deplorable is the willingness to confuse humiliation with truth. There are people inside these crowds with different motives. Some are misinformed, some are frightened, some are tribal, some are cynical, some are simply bored and want the heat of belonging. Some have been lied to for so long that truth now feels like an ambush. Interior states vary, but the performance remains what it is: civic sadism. A little theater of degradation in which the audience gets to feel righteous by becoming cruel together. That deserves a name. 9. The history of the frightened crowd. No crowd learns to cheer like this in one election cycle. It has to be catechized. Year after year, sermon after sermon, broadcast after broadcast, grievance after grievance, people were taught that their resentment was discernment, their disgust was courage, their suspicion was wisdom, their cruelty was common sense, and their loss of cultural dominance was persecution. This is not merely a Texas story. It is an American genealogy. Southern reaction after civil rights. Cold War anti-communist Christianity. The moral majority. School prayer battles. Anti-gay politics. Talk radio. The NRA's transformation from sporting culture into apocalypse liturgy. Fox News. The War on Terror. Anti-immigrant panic. The backlash to Obama. The rise of social media humiliation culture. The Trump permission structure. The conversion of every local anxiety into a national betrayal narrative. By the time Paxton gets on stage, he does not have to persuade the crowd. He only has to activate the inheritance. The script is already in them. Liberals hate you. Elites mock you. Immigrants replace you. Universities corrupt your children. Trans people are invading the bathroom of civilization. Climate activists want your truck. Doctors are lying. Journalists are lying. Courts are lying unless they agree with us. Elections are suspect unless we win. Democrats hate God. Only fighters can protect you. This is not a worldview. It is a weather system. Live inside it long enough, and cruelty starts to feel defensive. Mockery starts to feel like self-protection. Lies start to feel permissible if they move in the right emotional direction. That is the key. The specific claim does not have to be true if the emotional direction feels true. Maybe Tallarico is not vegan, but he feels vegan. Maybe he does not hate Jesus, but he feels like the kind of Christian who would make us answer for our treatment of the poor. Maybe trans people are not destroying America, but they feel like the world changing without our consent. This is identity-protective dishonesty. It is not ignorance alone. It is a discipline of misrecognition. And like all disciplines, it is practiced socially. If you repeat the caricature, you belong. If you laugh at the target, you belong. If you question the lie, you become suspect. If you defend the opponent's humanity, you may be next. The dishonesty becomes communal. The lie becomes a membership ritual. That is what the cheering was. A roll call. X. The misdirection machine. Every minute spent discussing the existential threat of soy is a minute not spent asking who made life unaffordable. This is not incidental. It is the function. The purpose of the freak is to hide the thief. Do not look at power. Do not look at corruption. Do not look at health care. Do not look at wages. Do not look at housing. Do not look at schools. Do not look at rural hospital closures. Do not look at corporate extraction. Do not look at addiction. Do not look at loneliness. Do not look at the billionaires buying legislation. Do not look at the men in office who have converted public service into private survival. Look at them. Look at the trans person. Look at the vegan. Look at the teacher. Look at the librarian. Look at the immigrant. Look at the drag performer. Look at the college student with blue hair. Look at the Christian Democrat saying something alarming about mercy. The genius of culture war politics is not that it invents emotion from nothing. It redirects real suffering toward false enemies. The wound may be real. The target is fraudulent. People are lonely. People are broke. People are sick. People are overworked. People are humiliated by systems they cannot name. People are watching their towns decay, their churches curdle, their children leave, their bodies fail, their debts grow, and their leaders perform concern while serving donors. Then someone hands them a scapegoat and says, "Here, this is why." It is evil because it is efficient. A society in pain can be made to crave the wrong punishment. That is why Paxton's mockery cannot be treated as mere vulgarity. It is governance by diversion. It is a carnival mirror placed in front of a crime scene. They want Texans laughing at Tofu because they do not want Texans asking who stole the hospital. They want Texans panicking about pronouns because they do not want Texans asking why life expectancy, wages, schools, housing, and public trust have been sacrificed to an economy of extraction. They want Texans defending Jesus from a Presbyterian because they do not want Texans asking why so many public Christians sound nothing like Christ. The joke is not separate from the theft. The joke protects the theft. 11. Refusing the trance. There is a trap in defending the target on the attacker's terms. One says, actually, he is not vegan. Actually, he does not hate Jesus. Actually, trans people are human beings. Actually, the number is small. Actually, the policy is more complex. Actually, the quote was distorted. All of this may be true. Some of it is necessary. Lies should be corrected. But correction alone can become captivity. The right chooses the object of panic, and everyone else spends the next week proving that the object does not deserve to be burned. The vulnerable are placed on trial. Their humanity becomes a debate prompt. Their existence becomes a segment. Their suffering becomes content for the same machine that endangered them. At some point, the answer is refusal. Not refusal to defend people, refusal to accept the structure of the obsession. These are people. They are not your explanation. A tiny, vulnerable population is not responsible for your hospital bill, your stagnant wage, your collapsed church, your loneliness, your debt, your bad schools, your fentanyl crisis, your broken masculinity, your spiritual emptiness, or your inability to distinguish Christianity from domination. Explain your record. Explain your corruption. Explain your donors. Explain your health care plan. Explain your schools. Explain why you need a freak to make your politics feel alive. The humane response is not to spend eternity proving that marginalized people are not monsters. It is to expose the people who require monsters. This is the sentence that should meet every manufactured panic. You are using vulnerable people as props to hide your failures. Again and again, until the room loses its appetite. 12. The final idol. The deepest lie was never about James Tallarico. It was not about veganism. It was not about trans people. It was not about Jesus. It was not about children. It was not about masculinity. It was not even about Texas, that vast symbolic warehouse where every American anxiety eventually puts on boots. The deepest lie was this: our resentment is righteousness. That is the idol. Paxton did not merely offer them a candidate. He offered them absolution without repentance. He gave them a way to feel morally clean while indulging contempt. He gave them a way to feel brave while mocking the vulnerable. He gave them a way to feel Christian while fleeing the demands of Christianity. He gave them a way to feel normal by making someone else grotesque. This is the old American prayer beneath the laughter. Let us remain normal. Let us remain innocent. Let us remain the people who never have to explain ourselves. Let the freak explain. Let the vulnerable explain. Let the merciful explain. Let the Christian who mentions the poor explain. Let the stranger explain. Let the wounded explain. Let the future explain itself before we allow it to arrive. But the prayer is getting tired. The laughter is loud, but it is not confident. The cruelty is theatrical because the fear is real. The mockery is exaggerated because the boundary is weakening. The old categories no longer hold without force. The old monopoly on faith, masculinity, patriotism, and normalcy has begun to crack. That is why a man like Tallarico must be made ridiculous before he is heard. Not because he is weak, because he might be legible, because a Christian who speaks of mercy threatens those who have mistaken grievance for gospel, because a gentleman threatens those who have mistaken cruelty for strength, Because a politics that returns attention to material suffering threatens those who survive by manufacturing symbolic enemies. Because if the crowd ever stopped laughing long enough to listen, it might have to ask what kind of men require so many lies to feel brave. They came for a victory speech and received instead a liturgy of permission. Permission to mock. Permission to lie. Permission to confuse disgust with discernment. Permission to confuse cruelty with courage. Permission to confuse the preservation of hierarchy with the defense of God. And somewhere beneath the applause, beneath the stage lights, beneath the slogans and the smirks and the frightened masculinity of meat products, one could hear the actual confession. We are afraid. Afraid of losing the country. Afraid of losing the old language. Afraid of losing the right to define normal. Afraid that the people we mocked may have seen something true. Afraid that Jesus may not belong to us. Afraid that the vulnerable were never the threat. Afraid that the theft happened elsewhere. Afraid that the freak was a mirror. The steak is frightened. The tofu, God help us, has become an eschatological event. And the empire, busy laughing at lunch, continues to rot from the head. Elias Winter, author of Language Matters, a space for reflection on language, power, and decline. Thanks for reading Language Matters. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.